Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you here today to our Torah Unleashed study. And you are here at Olive Tree Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we want to thank each and every one of you that is here on our study center, and those of you that are coming in through the internet or YouTube. Make sure you all subscribe and like it and hit that bell so that anytime we're on, we could notify you. I am sitting down today because I want to thank all of you for your prayers. I had a cardiac situation this week. On Wednesday, I went to the Veterans Hospital. They did a procedure and put one stent into my arteries and my heart. And so thank you all for your prayers. And many have prayed from all over the United States. In fact, I want to thank Rabbi Isaac Shapira. He sent word from Jerusalem, says, I'm praying for you from Jerusalem. So thank you, Rabbi, and those of you, that family and friends that are from different parts of the country that are praying for me. I want to thank you. So I'm going to kind of sit down and relax here today and kind of take it easy. So even the teaching is going to be a little on the low-key side, although they always say I'm kind of low-key. But anyways, want to thank you all. Today we are studying the Parsha Yitro. Everybody say with me, Yitro. And look at that. It's Ithro, Yitro. And it's Exodus 18:1 to 20:23, and it is the story of Yitro and Moshe. We learned today one of the most important teachings in the whole of Scriptures. What is the Mosaic covenant? What is what they call, a lot of people say the Old Testament. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. And most people think, watch this, most people think that the Old Testament is the 39 books in Hebrew, and the New Testament is the 27 books in Greek. That's not the Old and the New Testament. So today we're going to learn about what is the Mosaic covenant and what is the covenant. And the outline of our parasha today, Yitro, is there's a meeting between Yitro and Moshe and Moses. He appoints judges. The Israelites come to Sinai. Remember, they have already they left Egypt. The Exodus took place, and it took them 3 months to get to Sinai. And so today they get to Sinai. Yahweh promises to give them a covenant. They prepare for that covenant. And then there's a theophany. A theophany is an appearance where Adonai appears at Sinai. And then we have the Decalogue, which is the 10 commandments or the 10 words. And then there's a final one, the law concerning the altar. And so there is a meeting here, and go with me there to chapter 18 and begin with verse 1. Yitro, and again, in your English Bibles, he's called Jethro. Jethro. But in Hebrew, his name is Yitro. And so I'll use the Hebrew name for him. Yitro, who was a Cohen. He was a priest of Midian. Now, in the ancient world, a priest was the firstborn. If you were a firstborn son, those of you that are firstborn here in the audience, raise your hand, all you men that are firstborn, you would be the priest of the family. It would be your responsibility to be an intermediary between you and Elohim, or in the pagan religions, between you and, because this was also in the pagan religion, between you and the God that they served. And so he was a Cohen. So he was a priest. And this also was in the Israelites, the Hebrews. All the Hebrews, the firstborn sons, were always a Cohen, a priest, which is an in-between. And he was the choten, the father-in-law to Moshe. The word father-in-law in Hebrew is the choten. And it says there, he heard all that Elohim, Yitro heard that what Adonai had done, all the miracles of the Exodus, all the miracles, because word went around, caravans were going this way and that way, and Yitro heard what had happened. And so he comes from his home in Midian to the Sinai, towards the Sinai where Moshe was approaching, and there they meet in between, and they have this talk. And so he's all excited. He brings Zephora with the two sons. Remember, when they first came, Zephora came, and then she went back. Moses sent her back to Midian with her father-in-law, and now Zephora is brought back. And then they have a fellowship meal. One of the interesting things when groups met in the ancient world is they would have this communion. And a communion meal always it had bread, it had wine, and it had a sacrifice. They would do a sacrifice, communion sacrifices. And one of the aspects of eating together, a communion, a fellowship meal, was that you would partake of this sacrifice, and which would mean that you are all in cahoots with one another. You're all in fellowship with one another. This is a fellowship group. And this is one of the beginning aspects, because later on and throughout the scripture, you're going to find how people ate together, and how if you didn't eat with someone, or if someone was your enemy, you wouldn't eat with them. In fact, that still goes on in some of the Jewish world, and definitely in the Arab world, where if you are invited to eat, then that means there's a hookup there. There's a fellowship there, a communion that you have. And remember what communion means: common union. And there is a hookup there. But if someone refuses to eat with you, then there's a separation. And that's why later on we're going to find out that if there's a brother in sin, that you can't even have a meal with him. In other words, you must separate. You can't even have a meal with him. And so they have these communion services, and they're doing really good. But then what happens there in 18:3, it says, on the following day, after the fellowship, after they meet, and all the family, the kids are playing together, and all the women are talking, and the men are doing different things. The following day, Moshe took his seat to administer justice for the people. And the people were standing round him from morning till evening. And so the people there wanted justice. They wanted equity. Problems happen. One of the things about humans is that we always have problems many times one with another. Have you ever had problems with another person, a family member, close or distant, a neighbor, and even here in the congregation, this group or that group, or this person and that person, sometimes husband and wives, sometimes with parents and children. All kinds of things happen because we're human. We are human. And because of that, we have problems. Well, think of 1 million or so people, a little over 1 million people, and one person who is the leader here, Moshe. And all the bickering, the fighting, the situations, well, that was my donkey, or he, his cart ran over my son's foot, or whatever. Problems happen. And what Moshe would do is, it says there, from morning till evening, every day on this journey. Think of it on a journey, and you're going, and every day when you set up camp, you have to administer justice, and sometimes you're there 2-3 days administering justice. And Yitro looks at that and says, wait a second, Moshe, something's wrong here. You're taking too much on yourself. What you need is you need helpers. You need men to help you administer what you're doing, to be judges, arbitrators, mediators. And really, that is the beginning of what we would call the Beit Din system, as we're going to see. Now, this also is the Mosaic model of discipleship. The Mosaic model of discipleship. It says there in verse 19, Exodus 18:19, listen to my advice. His father-in-law tells him. So father-in-law, Yitro, is giving Moshe, his son-in-law, some advice. I'm going to give you, and Elohim be with you. Your task, Moshe, you're the leader. This is what now remember, he's an experienced priest. He's an experienced leader. Your task is to represent the people to Elohim. So in a sense, Moshe, as the called leader of Adonai, not the firstborn. Remember, Aaron was the firstborn. Moshe as the leader, as the one that was called. Remember, Adonai doesn't always call the firstborn. We saw that several times already. But Adonai called him to be the leader. Your task is to represent the people to Elohim, to lay their cases before Elohim. In other words, to be praying. I represent this people, Elohim. Father, bless the people. Bless so-and-so, bless so-and-so, bless so-and-so, bless so-and-so. All these so-and-sos are to be blessed. And so everyone is blessed. And he's the prayer warrior for the people. And to teach them the Hukim and the Torah. Oops. Wait a second. Aren't we getting ahead of ourselves? To teach them the Hukim. The word Hukim is the statutes. And the Torah. Oh, wait a second. The Torah wasn't given yet. What? The Torah wasn't given yet. The Torah was given. In fact, what the Torah is from Genesis 1:1 is when the Torah begins. The Torah is not the Mosaic covenant. The Torah is not the Mosaic mishpatim and hukim, laws, decrees, statutes. That's not the Torah. The Torah is the instruction of Adonai to his people. Now, the instruction of Adonai began in Genesis 1:1. In fact, the first instruction that Adonai gave, the first mishpatim to Adam and Eve is be fruitful and multiply. That's the first one. And then the Sabbath, and then all these other instructions from the time of Adam through Shem, through Noah, through Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. In fact, remember, we saw where it says that Abraham followed Torah. Well, how could Abraham follow Torah if Adonai hadn't given Torah through Moses? No, Adonai has been speaking to his people and giving instructions. You see, that's why Moshe, and I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but think of this. Moshe is administering justice. Well, what law code is he using? When you administer justice, you got to use a law code, don't you? Well, everything that Adonai had given from Adam to this point, and what Adonai had given and through Noah and all the people, remember, Adonai judged them because they were doing evil, they were doing bad. And anytime Adonai judged before Moses someone that did bad, it's because there was already a law code. There was already instructions. There was already teachings. There was already Torah. Moses is to teach them Torah. Now, from this point on, after Sinai and all the way for the next 40 years, Adonai is going to add more instructions, more Torah, so that the first 5 books, we call them Torah, but it has nothing to do, the Torah, first 5 books, have nothing to do with the Mosaic covenant as the Old Testament has nothing to do with that, insofar as we know that it is the Mosaic commandments and the Mosaic covenant that is inside of Torah. They're 2 different things. All of the Mosaic covenant is Torah, but not all Torah is the Mosaic covenant. And so his duty is to teach the hukim, the statutes that we've already learned from Genesis 1:1 to this point, and the instructions that Adonai has given to all the men that we talked about last week. Always Adonai calls a man, and he called all these men, and now he's calling Moshe. And show them the way. Show them chaderech. Chaderech. Show them the way that they ought to follow and how they ought to behave. So Moses' really main responsibility outside of being the leader is to be the teacher of Israel, to be the prophet of Israel, the speaker forth. He's supposed to get the word from Adonai and give it to the people, which is what the responsibility of a prophet is. To get the word of Adonai and prophetes, prophet means to speak forth the word. And that was his job. Teach him how to behave. So one of the responsibilities of you men that will become leaders in the future is to do the same thing. This is the model of discipleship. Every pastor, which is a shepherd, poyain, every person who is an elder, a presbyteros, every person who is an overseer, a bishop, episkopos, is called to oversee, called to lead, called to be an older man, a man of experience, called to be a shepherd. You will be the shepherds of the people that Adonai has given you. And along with that, you are not alone. I am not alone here. We have others that help out. In fact, because I had a stint put in this week, they told me I can't lift anything or carry anything. And I usually, at the end of reading the Torah scrolls, we lift up the Torah scrolls and we lift them high. And I couldn't do that. So Pastor Dave, our associate pastor here, lifted up the Torah scrolls. And you men, and beside him, here we have, excuse me, elders and what we call deacons, which is the biblical model of leadership. There are 2 models of leadership: the elders, the leaders, and then the deacons. The elders and leaders are the ones that Adonai has called to lead, and then he's called that every congregation should have some corporals, what we would call a corporal in the army. And by the way, the congregation of Adonai, Yeshua, has no sergeants. So don't let anyone charge you around. And there's no sergeants. There are leaders, and no leader should be a dictator over your faith. And then we have the deacons, which are like the corporals. Now, the corporals aren't privates. The corporals have a little authority, but their authority comes from the higher ups. But they have authority to help out, and that's what our deacons do. And right now we have 3 deacons, and we're going to be getting more to fulfill the biblical standards. At the same time, he says there in verse 21, from the people at large, from the men at large, choose capable and Elohim-fearing men, men who are trustworthy and incorruptible, and put them in charge of them as heads of thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s, and make them the people's permanent shofetim, judges. And a judge in those days was not just like, here comes the judge type of a thing. It was a leader or a person who had some kind of also other authority. They will refer all important matters to you, but all minor matters, they will decide themselves. So making things easier for you by sharing the burden with you. And so this is the Mosaic model of leadership and discipleship. That the leader, the person that in the new covenant, remember, right now we're living in new covenant times. We're not living in first covenant times or Abrahamic covenant times or Mosaic covenant times or Davidic covenant times. We're living in new covenant times. New covenant times is the messianic apostolic times that we're living in. So through Yeshua, he has done some what we would call major modifications. That's why the book of Hebrews calls the new covenant a better covenant. And that's why with Jeremiah 31:31, behold, the days are coming. It is Yahweh who speaks. When I will make a Brit Chadashah, a new covenant, a renewed covenant, with the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah. Not like the covenant I made with them in those days. They broke that covenant of mine, and I had to show them who is the master. No, this is the covenant I will make with them in those days. Deep within their hearts, I will plant my Torah. So Jeremiah, again, what we call the new covenant is not a Christian thing. That's not something that the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church came up with. No, that is part of Adonai's ongoing progressive plan for Israel. It is Israel that received the new covenant. The new covenant was not given to the Gentiles. The new covenant was given to Israel. Because, as we're going to see in weeks to come, we broke that covenant in Sinai. The golden calf and other ways, we broke that covenant. Literally, Moses broke the covenant, broke the stone tablets. Literally, it was broken. So Jeremiah, by Adonai's design, through his son Yeshua, brought about a Brit Chadashah, a renewed covenant. So we're living in new covenant times. But yet, the principles that Adonai gave to Moshe over here are still applicable. They're still around. They are not obsolete. They're still there. It's just that through Messiah and through the apostles, we're going to see, through Paul, he's going to show us a different way. By the way, this picture is of a seat, and that is called the seat of Moses. This particular one is in one of the synagogues that we work with, the synagogue at Chorazin, right north of Capernaum, on top of the hill. And we call this a black synagogue because all the stones are black. The synagogue in Capernaum right now is a white synagogue because it was all made by white marble. This one was black basalt. But this is where the teacher sat. Yeshua sat on this seat whenever he spoke in the synagogue, which he did, like Capernaum, like the other synagogue. The teacher, whoever the teacher was for the day, would take their seat. And we are told that when Yeshua was in Nazareth, he read from the scroll. Then it says he took his seat and he spoke, and they always spoke sitting down. We usually speak standing up. But the word seat, by the way, in Greek is the word cathedra. You kind of, wait, cathedra, that sounds like cathedral, doesn't it? Yeah. When we think of a cathedral, we think of this big, giant building. No, a cathedral is the place where the bishop or the overseer, the leader, the shepherd, in those days, the rabbi, would sit to teach. And when you taught standing up, you were giving instructions. But when you sat down to teach, that was the very word of Elohim. Those of you that were Catholics, we see the same thing. Whenever the Pope gives something ex cathedra, out of the chair, it carries more weight than anything he says standing up or any other position on his knees or even from his deathbed. Anything that is ex cathedra, out of the chair, is thus saith Yahweh in biblical times with Moses, and from that it's been carried on over here. So this is the beginning of what we call the Beit Din system. The word Beit Din means the house of judgment or a time of judging. And it is through the word of Yitro, Moshe's Choten, Moshe's father-in-law, that he appoints these judges. Now, like I said, the appointment of these judges is not just for that time, but Yeshua carries this out. What Adonai, remember, the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, everything there is foundational for everything from Joshua to Revelation. The first 5 books are foundational to everything from Joshua to Malachi, and then from Matthew to Revelation. Everything is foundational here. So we see here as the foundation. Yeshua adds to this. Now watch what Yeshua, in what I call the Messianic Apostolic Beit Din. Messianic because it comes from Yeshua. Apostolic because it comes from the apostles. Now, Matthew 18, 15, and 20. Matthew 18, 15, and 20. And I'll read it because we don't have it on the screen today. If your brother does something wrong, how many know that? Remember what we said? We're humans. Somebody is going to do something wrong at some point or the other. If your brother does something wrong, go and have it out with him alone. Now, that doesn't mean duke it out. Okay? If somebody does something wrong, go and have it out with him alone between your two selves. If he listens to you, you've won back your brother. Okay? It doesn't say, if your brother does something wrong, go tell your friend, who will tell 3 of his friends, who will tell 5 of his friends, who will tell 20 of his friends, and pretty soon the whole world knows your problems. We call that Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is the evil tongue. It's known by gossip. And there's all kinds of little old lady and little old men, gossipers out there. And so you've won back your brother. You don't tell anybody. You go to your brother. Always remember, you always ask your brother. If you see something wrong, and by the way, if somebody comes up to you and says there's something wrong, don't judge. Don't judge it. Scripture says, judge not lest he be judged. No. Allow yourself to be judged. We don't like that. Allow yourself to be judged. And when someone speaks to you and says, something's wrong here, something happened here, or you did this, or this happened, this is the time of repentance. You're not there to condemn the person. You don't go there to judge him. You go there to win him back. If he listens to you, you've won back a brother. But what happens if he doesn't listen to you? What if he tells you, go fly a kite or something worse? If he does not listen, then take one or two others with you. Whatever the misdemeanor, the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses is required to sustain any charge. And so if he doesn't listen, then get 1 or 2 friends, say, you know what? And again, this is not gossip. You take 1 or 2 people and says, this is what my friend did to me, or this is what so-and-so did to me, and I need to have you go with me to witnesses. And you go to the same person, same thing, not tell anybody else, and then you say, you hurt me, or you did this, let's get things right. I apologize, or I repent if I've done anything wrong to you, but, you know, we need to resolve this. If he listens, you've won back your brother. If with the witnesses that was strong enough for him to say, you know what, I really blew it, forgive me. But what happens if he refuses? Verse 13. Verse 17. But if he refuses to listen to these, report it to the community. Report it to the congregation. And if he refuses to listen to the congregation, treat him as a Gentile or as a tax collector. Now, this is a heavy thing. If someone that refuses to repent of something that they've done, a misdemeanor that they've done against you or against something that is part of what you are, and again, don't go for someone else, go for yourself, but bring others with you on the second time. Report it to the community. In other words, report it to the leadership. Sometimes you could take the leadership on as a witness, but if you take other people and they don't listen, then come to the leadership and says, you know what, so-and-so has done this, and we've tried, I've gone to himself, I took witnesses, what do we do? The community, the leadership, sits down with him in the Beit Din and says, we need to get this resolved. Remember, it's all about resolution. It's all about reconciliation. The most important thing is we need to reconciliate, not judge, not hate the brother, not do this. And again, this is also for marriages, for families, for, I've had to do this. One time I was, Sherry was driving some kids to Sunday school, and she was using one of our cars, and she went over a ditch and hit a culvert that was sticking up toward the bottom side of the car out. And while it was a Christian company, they had the fish on it, and it was a Christian company that either they forgot to put, don't pass here, or some kids took it out or whatever. But anyways, me, a lawyer, and another person went to the company president, and we took his pastor along. His pastor was there, and he went there, and us went over there, and told him, that this is what happened. And so what he did is he just wrote out a check and gave me from the 3 receipts that I had gotten, and we solved it right away. It was solved. We didn't have to go to court. We solved it right away. And that's what it's about. It's about reconciliation. It's about resolution. In truth, I tell you. Oh, by the way, it says, treat him like a Gentile or tax collector. In other words, treat him like a non-believer. A Gentile is a non-believer. A tax collector was even worse than a non-believer in those days. So in other words, separate yourself from him. excommunicate him. See, we don't like that word excommunicate. We don't like that word shunning today. That's what Israel did. In fact, Israel says, kick him out of the camp. They were supposed to leave the camp, excommunicate. He is no longer part of Israel, it says in Torah. Yeshua follows the same system. But now, Yeshua brings that idea, go to him, take witnesses. Again, according to Scripture, the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. Treat him like a non-believer. In truth, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth, treating him like a non-believer, will be bound in heaven. Heaven will treat him like a non-believer. Whatever you loose on earth, if you bring him back, he repents and you bring him back on earth, the leaders, then heaven will follow your lead. Well, wait a second. Isn't that interesting? That if the leadership declares someone a Gentile and a tax collector, heaven, and remember, in Matthew, heaven is a euphemism for Elohim, because Matthew doesn't use the word Elohim every time. It's not the kingdom of Elohim, as in the other Gospels. Matthew always uses the kingdom of heaven instead of Elohim, because he was writing to a Jewish audience. So heaven listens to the leadership of a congregation, of a community. In truth, I tell you, once again, if 2 of you on earth agree to ask anything at all, it will be granted to you by my Father in heaven. For wherever 2 or 3 meet in my name, I am there among them. Now, most of the time, everybody uses those for, I cast you out demons, all this stuff, or prayer. That's not what the primary verses of whatever you bind and loose, of agreeing 2 or 3 on earth, will be granted. That has to do, the primary key of that has to do with treating someone as a non-believer, excommunicating someone. Interesting, isn't it? The Beit Din should still be applicable today. 1 Corinthians 5:1. It is reported commonly. So this is not gossip. This is not innuendo. This is outright. These guys were in public. It's reported commonly that there is fornication among you, immorality, and such immorality as is not so much as named among the Gentiles. Even the Gentiles don't do this. Some of them did, but not all the Gentiles did this. That one should have his father's wife. Another one, a believer was living with his stepmom. That's incest. And you are puffed up, and have you not rather have mourned? These guys were proud that, hey, grace, we believe in grace. It's all about grace, 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 grace. Shouldn't you be mourning? Someone that's doing that, that's not grace. Allowing someone to do that, that's not grace. You shouldn't be puffed up. Paul says you should be rather mourned. That he that has done this deed might be taken away from you, might be excommunicated. You need to get rid of this guy. For verily, I am absent from you all in the body. He was in another place. But I'm present with you. I'm here with you in the spirit. And I've already judged. And he used the word judged. Him already. As though I were present. Concerning that person that did this deed. In the name of our Master Yeshua the Messiah. When you are gathered. Talking to it was addressed to the leaders and deacons, the elders and deacons there in Corinth. When you are gathered together in the power of our Master Yeshua to deliver such a one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that his spirit might be saved in the day of our Master Yeshua. excommunicate him. When you excommunicate someone, you're actually delivering him to Satan. You know, when people sin, people say, oh, let's give him up to the Lord. Just put him in the Lord's hands. The Lord says, I don't want him. Give him to Satan. Paul says, the person that has done this person that's committing incest and in the body. And by the way, we know it's in the body because remember it said, and this is Passover time, because remember Paul says that Messiah is our Passover. Get rid of the unleavened, and get rid of the leaven. And this was leaven in the community. This guy was in the congregation, and everybody was okay with it. And he says, deliver him to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that he might be saved. In other words, Satan will take his life. Any person that's excommunicated, Satan could take their life. And if they're believers on that day of Yeshua, on the rapture, they'll be raptured. Yes, they'll be raptured. They'll lose all their rewards, but they will be saved. 1 Corinthians 6:1. Does any one of you, when he has a case against his neighbor, dare to go to law before the unrighteous, to the law courts of the unrighteous, and not before the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you not competent to constitute the smallest law courts? Beit Dins, that's where the word Beit Din would come in. Do you not know that we shall judge angels? How much more matters of this life? If then you have law courts, Beit Dins, dealing with matters of this life, do you not appoint them as judges who are of no account to the body of Messiah, the Kehillah? I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not one among you, one wise man, who will be able to decide between the brothers? But brother goes to the law courts with his brother and before unbelievers in city court. Actually, then, it is already a defeat for you that you have lawsuits with one another. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? On the contrary, you yourselves wrong and defraud. So we shouldn't, here's where we get the idea that believers should not go to court against a believer. We should bring it before the Beit Din. Isn't there anyone here? And that applies to divorce decrees and all these kinds of things that have nothing to do with the unbelievers. We could settle those among ourselves. But the problem is that many times people are very stubborn. The thing that really hurt Israel is stubbornness. Because when you come before a law court, interesting enough, you go downtown to the law court to go settle a situation. The judge hits the gavel. Case, either dismissed or, you owe this person $3,000 or this, and this, and you go with it. But then you come to the body of Messiah, which is a higher Beit Din, a higher law court than them. And you don't listen to the leaders, to the two or three. And that's why it says, why not be defrauded? In fact, it's better to be defrauded. If somebody stole $1,000 from you, it's better to say, you know what, I give it to you, Adonai, rather than going to downtown and suing the brother. Better be wronged. See, we don't like to be wrong. We don't like, that's pride. But we'd rather. Paul tells us there. But not only do you not want to be wronged and defrauded, but then you wrong and defraud. And again, that applies in all these areas of family and marriage and within the congregation. People that, I don't know how many times people have left. None of this has applied to them. They washed their hands. People sometimes wash their hands and then they go to the congregation next door and then become the leader. In fact, we have leaders in Albuquerque that have left here in wrong situations, and now they're leading. Now they're, musicians and all this type of stuff. Wait a second. Doesn't anybody understand biblical justice? Yes, we know about biblical grace and mercy, and we want that. But remember, there's also biblical justice that we as believers need to have. But then they arrive at Sinai. And we have what we call the Great Sinai Controversy. The real Sinai depends on the real Yam Suf, what's called the Red Sea in English, or the Sea of Reeds crossing. Where did they cross the sea? Where is Sinai? I don't know. And nobody else knows. I don't know where Sinai is. Don't let anybody tell you this is Sinai, because none of us know. We have at least 5 positions, but we don't have all the geographical and the right cities and the right towns and the right deserts. And there are at least 4 or 5 crossings and Sinai's out there. So at this point, I will not make a archaeological, geographical decision until we have more evidence. And we need the evidence. But they get to Sinai. Whatever it is, they get to Sinai. Now, in this chart from Egypt to Sinai, we know that they left Egypt. They went to Sukkot. They went to Etham, which is at the edge of the wilderness. But then they turn back. Adonai tells them to turn back to Pi Harotet, right by Migdal. And they cross a body of water, the Yam Suf. Now, that body of water could be the Bitter Lakes. It could be the Gulf of Aqaba, or what is called the Gulf of Suez. I don't know what body of water, but they crossed the body of water to Baal Zephon. By the way, be careful with what's called eisegesis. I am an exegete. What I'm doing right now is exegeting from the text. This is what the text is saying. To eisegete means to put into the text. Be careful. And there's a lot of messianics that are getting into Kabbalah, that are getting into all kinds of mystical numbers, gematria, and all kinds of explanations of what name, and they use like the name Baal Zephon. All of a sudden they say, well, this is this, and this means this. And when they went here, they add all kinds of lettuce to the thing. They add all kinds of stuff to it that doesn't need to be added. Keep to what is written. Paul in 2 Corinthians tells us, keep to what is written. And we'll see more of that here. We have to see what it says. These are places that they stopped. The places don't have no mystical meaning, no type of meaning, And they're just places. So be careful with people that start throwing Kabbalah or start throwing Mishnah and Talmud into what the text actually says. I'm really concerned that there are people who are doing that even here in our congregation. And they go on the journey. They go to the wilderness of Shur, Mara, and they go to Elam, the wilderness of Sin, Raphaim, where they got water, and they arrive at Mount Sinai. Now, interestingly enough, it took about 3 days to get from Egypt to the Yam Suf. Wherever the Yam Suf is, it took 3 days to get there. But from the Yam Suf to Sinai, that takes 3 months. It's 3 months. That's a long time. Now the Israelites come to Sinai. Now, according to, and go with me now to Exodus 19. 3 months after they came out of the land of Egypt, on that day, 3 months, on that day, they come to Sinai. Moshe goes up the mountain. Moshe comes down the mountain. Moshe goes up the mountain. Moshe comes down the mountain. He goes up and down. Now, these are not the only up and down times he comes. He's constantly going up or down, up or down, up or down. In fact, from this point on, get your scriptures, and every time it says Moses goes up, put an arrow going up. When it says Moses goes down, put an arrow going down. And you'll see. One of the things that we need to look at is from Egypt to the wilderness of Sinai. From Egypt to the wilderness of Sinai. It says 3 months to the day. Oh. After leaving Egypt, the Israelites reached the wilderness of Sinai. 3 months. Now, what does 3 months mean? You think that 3 months is 3 months. But what does 3 months mean? There's several possibilities. One possibility is that 3 months means 3 full months. And again, in those days, the months were 29 and a half days or 30 days. So let's say 30 days. 30 plus 30 plus 30 is how much? 90. 90 days. So think, wait a second. They left Egypt on the 15th. From there, it took him 90 days to get there. But Moses goes up and down, so we got to account for, did that happen in 1 day and 2 days and 3 days? That's a long way to go up the mountain from the bottom. But then when he goes up to the top the second time, Adonai says, I want you to wait 3 days. So they wait 3 days. So we're talking about 93, 96, 97 days. By the time that they get to Sinai and Moses does all this? Or is it on the 3rd month? Are we talking on the 3rd month? What is the 3rd month? The 3rd month means that we have 30 days the 1st month, 30 days the 2nd month, which is how much? And on the 3rd month, in other words, the 1st day of the 3rd month, which is 61, plus going up and down, plus the 3 days they have to wait. So 60 some days. Well, wait a second. I thought that they say that 50 days after they left Egypt, Israel received the 10 Commandments. We're not even talking about receiving the 10 Commandments. And when it says receiving the 10 Commandments, which ones? Because there's 4 sets. Moses receives Israel receives the 10 Commandments 4 times. Which one of those is it? The giving of the Torah on Shavuot controversy. Every time that Shavuot happens, everyone celebrates the giving of the Torah. Well, wait a second. How could the Torah is celebrated on Shavuot when they didn't get to Sinai until 95 days or so, 65 days or so, the 50 days of counting the Omer, which there's no such thing as 50 days of counting the Omer. Biblically, there's counting the 7 Sabbaths. We count 7 Sabbaths biblically. And so today, rabbinicalism says that the day of first fruits was on Nisan 16. 50 days from Nisan 16 is Sivan 6. 50 days. So Sivan 6 is always the giving of the Torah or Shavuot in the rabbinical method. But that's a post-biblical tradition. That's a modern tradition. The biblical day after Shabbat is when first fruits is. So we count from the first day after Shabbat, which is Yom Rishon, a Sunday, and then we count 50 days to the day after the seventh Sabbath, Yom Rishon to Yom Rishon, 50 days. That's biblical. But I do not believe that the Torah was given on Shavuot just because it took them 3 months to get 50 days does not fit into 3 months, whether it's the 3 full months or on the 3rd month. Now, Exodus 19:3. Yahweh called him, Moses, from the mountain, saying, Thus shall you say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the sons of Israel. And by the way, that's called Hebrew parallelism. The house of Yaakov and the sons of Israel. Yaakov is Israel. The house are the sons of Israel. So we call that parallelism. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings. By the way, look at that. That's a metaphor. How I bore you on eagle's wings. So whenever you see in Revelation, Daniel, or other Adonai using this figure of speech, he didn't literally put them on wings of eagles and they flew from Egypt to Sinai. No. It just means that Adonai carried them, protected them, had them all the time under, in a sense, his wing, on eagle's wings, and brought you to me. Because Sinai is the mountain of Yahweh. I brought you to me. I brought you out of Egypt and I brought you to me. I didn't bring you to Sinai. I brought you to me, to my mountain. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully. If. This is what's called a conditional clause. Now, look what he tells Abraham. No matter what Abraham does, it's unconditional. All the covenants that Adonai has given up to this point are unconditional. All of a sudden, we have a conditional covenant. This tells you that the Mosaic covenant is not unconditional. It's conditional. If, now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant. What happens if they don't? What happens if they break the covenant? What happens if they are not faithful? If you keep my covenant, you indeed shall be my treasured possession among all the people. Indeed, all the earth is mine. All the people of the earth is mine. Now, listen to this. Listen to this carefully. I wanted to make sure I came today because there's things in this Parsha that I believe are very important that sometimes we like this verse, there's so much treasure in this verse. Watch what it says. If you keep my covenant, you will indeed be my treasured possession among all the peoples, among every nation, tribe, peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. Oh, they're all, todos son míos, Adonai says. They're all mine. But you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel, Adonai told Moshe. A kingdom of priests, a holy nation. Interesting enough, and I wish we had time to go to this, but interesting enough, that's what Peter in the epistle says you are talking to the believers. If you keep my covenant, what happens if they didn't keep the covenant? Then they're not his treasured possession. Then they're not the kingdom of priests. They're not a holy nation. Holy nation means a set apart nation. No. But all the earth is mine, and I could do and give and include anyone whosoever I will. And that's what Adonai has done with the body of Messiah. Any believer who keeps his covenant is also part of the treasured possession, whether you're Jew or Gentile, whether you're male or female, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're handsome or funny looking. He speaks to us today through Yeshua. Now, Yahweh promises a covenant, but it's a conditional covenant. The possession, the royal priesthood, the holy nation is conditional upon obedience. And we've already seen at disobedience what Adonai did. When they disobeyed in the time of the judges, Adonai brought judgment. When they obeyed, Adonai blessed them. What happened with Babylon? What happened with the 10 kingdoms? They were cast out. They're not his treasure possession. Any of them repent, they will be. Any Jewish person who continues in the covenants of Adonai, that he will even make the new covenant, is his treasure possession, his holy nation. But anyone who steps out of covenant, and that includes the Gentiles now for us, if we abandon the covenant, if we go away from Adonai and apostatize, then we are no longer his treasure possession, his holy nation. It's conditional. Now we're going to talk about the Decalogue here, the 10 words. The word, by the way, it doesn't use the word 10 commandments. It uses commandments, but it doesn't use the word 10 commandments. It uses the word, the 10 words. Asaret Chadevarim. Say with me, Asaret Chadevarim. The Greek word is Decalogos, the 10 words. Deca is 10 and logos is word. The 10 words. Adonai gives the 10 words. Now he tells them to prepare for the covenant. Exodus 19:9. They are to consecrate themselves. Consecrate themselves means to set themselves apart. Even their clothing, they're to wash their clothing. Think of it. Adonai says, when you come to me, I want you set apart. I want you to even wash your clothing. I want you to be even separate from your wives. Do not be with your wives that day. Separate yourselves and come to me. And so all the men consecrated themselves. They washed their clothing. They separated from their families, and they came forward. And that's when Adonai had the theophany, the apparition on Sinai. And it says on the third day, it took them 3 days to consecrate themselves, to make sure that they were kadosh, clean. Even the physical dirt on the clothing had to be washed. There was thunder, lightning. Yahweh appears on the mountain. The mountain was full of smoke, the thunder, the lightning. And all the people were afraid. All the people came to Moses, and Moses goes up the mountain, gets final instructions. Moses comes down the mountain. So Moses is with the men. Moses is with the people at the bottom of the mountain. And then Elohim spoke all these words. He said, Ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Adonai speaks the 10 words. He speaks them. And it's a running speech by Adonai. I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other Elohim before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of Yahweh your Elohim in vain, for Yahweh will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son nor your daughter, your male or female servant, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and the earth, and all that is in them, and rested. And on the seventh day, therefore Yahweh blessed the seventh day, and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the day which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant or female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Flashes of lightning, thunder, the sound of a shofar could be heard. The tremendous voice of Adonai spoke these words, reverberated throughout the whole of Mount Sinai, throughout the whole wilderness area, to the point that it says there in verse 18, all the people shook with fear at the peals of thunder and the lightning and the sound of the shofar and the smoking mountain, and they kept their distance. And they told Moshe, you speak to us. We do not want to hear his voice. The voice of Elohim was tremendous on that mountain, and they felt afraid. And they said, we want Moses to speak to us. Now, can you imagine that? They could have been hearing the word of Adonai for all those, for that year that they were in Sinai. Adonai would be speaking to them, but they didn't want to hear his voice no more. So Moses had to go up and listen to the word. And by the way, it didn't take too long for me to read that. And that's what Adonai actually spoke. If it was a minute or two, for that minute or two that Adonai spoke, that his sound went out, brought fear to the people. Now we're going to see next week, this is for next week, Exodus 24:4, it says, Moses put all the words of Yahweh into writing, and early next morning he built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 standing stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. Then taking the scroll of the covenant, he read it to the listening people, and then said, we shall do everything that Yahweh has said, we will obey. Remember, that's what they had said the first day before they even heard the covenant. Now, what they heard, the 10 commandments, the 10 words that they heard, Moses put into writing. He wrote it down in a scroll. And this scroll, all of a sudden, he reached to the people. So not only did they hear it from Adonai, now, second time, he reads it to them and they hear it. And they sacrifice a bull, and they get the blood and they sprinkle it on the scroll. And Moses says, this is the blood of the covenant. That parchment, that scroll, that leather, probably about that big, that had the 10 Commandments, what I just read, written on them. Now, he says, this is the blood of the covenant. Doesn't that sound familiar? Yeshua took the cup, and he says, this is the blood of the new covenant. So what Moses was doing here with an actual sacrifice, talking about the covenant, Yeshua says, this is my body, this is my blood, this is the blood of the new covenant, Brit Chadashah. What Jeremiah 31:31 prophesied is occurring on Passover night with Yeshua. Now let me read you some verses here. Yahweh said to Moses, come up to the mountain and stay there, and I will give you the stone tablets, the Torah and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction. The Torah and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction, which I have written. And the word instruction there is the word yara. The word Torah comes from yara. Yara means to throw out. Instruction means, like right now, I'm instructing you, I'm throwing out yara. Exodus 31:18. When he finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, inscribed by the finger of Elohim. The tablets, Exodus 32:15, were written on both their sides. On the one side and on the other they were written. Deuteronomy 4:13, he declared to you his covenant, the 10 words, which he commanded you to follow, and then wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. Deuteronomy 5:22. Thunderously, with thunder, he spoke to you from the heart of the fire. In cloud and thick darkness, he added nothing, but wrote them on 2 tablets of stone, which he gave to me. Now watch what Moses says. It's important this is very important. He added nothing, but wrote them on 2 tablets of stone, which he gave to me. He added nothing. There are people that says he gave us the written Torah, and then he told Moses the oral Torah. He added nothing, just what was written. That's why Paul says in 2 Corinthians, keep to what is written. The 10 words in tablets of stone, and we will continue this later on. Next week we have a guest speaker that will continue with this teaching, and will be able to explain much of it. Next week is Parsha Mishpatim, and what's interesting with Parsha Mishpatim is that it's what I call lawyer talk. And what's interesting about lawyer talk is that our guest speaker, he's an elder at his congregation in Colorado Springs, is a lawyer. And so next week, lawyer talk, Mishpatim, is actually going to be taught by a lawyer. And so we want to ask Adonai that on that day that you all come and join us and be part of Mishpatim. I want to thank each and every one of you. And I also want to thank you for giving to Olive Tree, especially those of you that have sent through PayPal. And you could come to our olivetreefellowship.com and be able to give, or you could give through our congregation here. We are at 2621 Cagua, that is Cagua Drive Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico 87110. We have a very secure mail system here that if you send us an offering, it'll get to us. So I thank you for those offerings and believe that Adonai is going to do a mighty, mighty work as he's been doing for all these years. Again, thank you. Let's stand. Thank you for your prayers for my cardiac situation, and that Adonai will cause this stint to work faithfully until that day. Father, I thank you for your people. I thank you, Father, for their giving, for their support. I thank you for the prayers that I received this week, Father. And I thank you that you are going to bless them. Yevarechecha Yahweh vaish merecha. Air Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Shavua tov.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.